So in the middle of your book, you write, "Some people think I've changed. I assure you I have not. I'm still the same unmarried, childless, pot-smoking libertine I always was. I have many flaws, but you can't accuse me of maturing."
It's interesting. They have this idea, the younger generation, maybe every generation does, that just because something is new makes it better. And that's not true. New is not synonymous with better.
But you're sounding like an old-fashioned conservative.
Okay. I mean, you mentioned Ronald Reagan. Famously, he used to have a drink at the end of the day, often with Tip O'Neill, who was the leader in the House and the Democrat. But they were just two Irish Pauls who could get together and have a scotch at the end of the day. And they knew they weren't going to get along on many issues, but they didn't hate each other. They could drink together. That is inconceivable today. Can you imagine Joe Biden having a drink with Mike Johnson?
Bill Maher just dropped a truth bomb so explosive, even his most loyal fans are wondering whose side he's really on. One moment he's laughing with Donald Trump behind closed doors, the next he's ripping into the left with the precision of a flamethrower. The internet hasn't been this divided over Maher in years, and the fallout is brutal. But make no mistake, this wasn't a soft defense. Maher didn't show up to explain himself. He showed up to burn down the hypocrisy. The outrage mob came for him, and he didn't just clap back, he scorched the earth.
So I'm going to call it out wherever I see it. I mean, there are things that have to do with, gender and race and free speech and just ideas about, you can be healthy at any weight, and gender is always a social construct, and maybe we should give communism another try, and maybe we should get rid of capitalism and the border patrol, and let's tear down statues of Lincoln and get rid of the police. Just, no. It's not that I've gotten old, it's that your ideas are stupid, okay?
Common sense is still common sense.
Yes, common sense is common sense, and I'm going to call it out wherever it is on the spectrum.
In the days leading up to this moment, social media was ablaze with fury from the far left. Bill Maher, once their liberal champion, had committed the unthinkable. He sat down with Donald Trump. To some, it was betrayal. To Maher, it was a conversation, and he wasn't going to apologize for having one. Instead, he walked back on stage with a verbal flamethrower in hand. He took direct aim at what he called the religion of progressivism, a new orthodoxy that demands obedience, punishes dissent, and trades open dialogue for outrage. He didn't tiptoe. He named names and named problems. "No," he said, "it's not that I've gotten old. It's that your ideas are stupid." Maher wasn't speaking to political opponents. He was addressing the crowd that used to cheer him on. And now, they were booing. But this wasn't the climax. It was just the first punch. He didn't just defend himself. He dismantled the very foundation of what he says the modern left has become. In Maher's eyes, it's no longer about progress. It's about control. He pointed to ideological purity tests, the expectation that you not only believe, but perform your beliefs at all times, that unless you're loud enough, radical enough, and emotionally charged enough, you're part of the problem. And worst of all, there's no room for disagreement. Not even a little. Maher described a movement obsessed with optics and outrage, where disagreement isn't debated, it's destroyed, where the loudest voice wins, and common sense is drowned in slogans. And it's not just about policy, it's about how you think, who you talk to, and even who you're allowed to date. It's not just in politics anymore, Maher said. It's in your friendships, your family, your relationships, even your wedding. He wasn't exaggerating. A viral story recently made headlines when a young woman called off her entire wedding, not because of infidelity or family drama, but because her fiancé didn't post enough about social justice issues online. Not that he was against them, he just wasn't vocal enough, and that alone made him problematic. To Maher, this isn't activism. It's moral absolutism wrapped in hashtags. It's purity tests for who you're allowed to love. A worldview where neutrality equals violence, and silence is the new sin. But if you thought that was harsh, just wait. Maher's next target wasn't a stranger. It was his own political party. He accused the Democratic Party of failing on the biggest stage, their legal response to Donald Trump. Maher didn't hold back. He ripped into what he saw as years of wasted time, endless delays, and a weak strategy that allowed Trump to walk circles around them. Why? Maher asked. Did it take 4 years to bring cases to trial? Why did Merrick Garland wait so long? And why are we watching flimsy state-level cases when serious federal ones should have been front and center? Maher's point was clear. Democratic leaders weren't outplayed. They were outmaneuvered. And now, instead of owning their mistakes, they're blaming him for telling the truth. And the backlash? It wasn't just from activists. Even Maher's friends, people he's worked with, laughed with, and admired, began to turn on him. Case in point, Larry David, the legendary comedian, took a public swing at Maher, blasting him for meeting with Trump and comparing the former president to Hitler. But Maher didn't flinch. He didn't just push back, he obliterated the comparison. "I don't need to be lectured about Trump," he said. "And comparing him to Hitler? That's not just lazy. It's deeply offensive to the memory of 6 million murdered Jews." Maher reminded everyone, disagreeing with someone politically doesn't mean they're evil. And if your only argument is to throw around the H word, you've already lost. Then came the gut punch. "You can hate Trump," Maher said, "but you can't hate everyone who likes him. That's half the country." And in one sentence, he exposed the fatal flaw in the modern left's strategy. It's driven more by moral outrage than by connection, more by echo chambers than empathy. Has Bill Maher gone conservative, or has the left just lost the plot? For decades, Maher was one of the loudest liberal voices in media, an unapologetic skeptic of war, religion, and Republican policies. He tore into conservatives with razor-sharp wit and left little room for misinterpretation. If it came from the right, Maher had smoke for it. But now, things aren't so clear. Yes, he still criticizes Trump, and harshly. He's called the former president a threat to democracy, warned early about election denialism, and predicted long before others that Trump wouldn't leave office peacefully. Yet somewhere along the way, Maher's crosshairs began shifting, not off Trump, but toward his own side. He began confronting the left's cultural blind spots. He called out extreme gender ideology, questioned climate doomsday rhetoric, and pushed back on identity politics run amok. Not because he was abandoning liberal values, but because, in his words, "the left left me." Now, critics accuse him of drifting right, but Maher insists he's not moving. It's the ideological landscape around him that's collapsing into extremes, and while one side is losing its grip on reality, the other has lost its grip on nuance. So is Maher becoming a conservative? Or is he simply the last liberal who remembers what liberalism used to be? And then, he went there. Maher turned the flamethrower toward the press, and didn't let go. If the political left is Maher's first target, the mainstream media is his second. He didn't just criticize them, he exposed them. On his show, Maher openly mocked the idea that major outlets like CNN are neutral platforms. He recounted a moment on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, where Colbert claimed that CNN just reports the facts. The audience erupted in laughter, and not the good kind. Even they didn't buy it. Maher didn't laugh. He called it out. He argued that today's media, especially networks once known for journalistic credibility, have become little more than partisan echo chambers. They don't just cover stories, they craft narratives. They don't inform, they inflame. To Maher, it's not just bad journalism, it's dangerous. He pointed out how media outlets have gone from watchdogs to attack dogs, losing all sense of balance in a bid to maintain ideological loyalty. And nowhere was this clearer than their relentless war on Trump. Not Trump's policies, not his actions, but the man himself. From day one, Maher says, outlets like CNN pre-hated him, before a single executive order was signed, before one speech was made, before the oath of office. And that kind of bias? It poisons public trust. In Maher's view, it's not just about Trump anymore. It's about the erosion of objectivity and the rise of entertainment masquerading as journalism. But here's what people still miss about Maher's evolution. Maybe Maher hasn't changed. Maybe he's just the last one still telling the truth without checking which party it hurts. In a world where taking a side seems mandatory, where neutrality is treated like betrayal, Maher stands out like a sore thumb. Not because he's flawless, not because he's always right, but because he refuses to play by tribal rules. He criticizes Trump and Biden. He supports free speech even when it's unpopular. He defends facts even when the crowd boos. He's been called a traitor, a sellout, a bigot, and a conservative plant, sometimes all in the same week. But through it all, Maher has one simple principle. Truth doesn't come with a political label, and maybe that's what makes him dangerous. To the left, he's a problem because he won't toe the line. To the right, he's inconvenient because he still calls out Trump. And to the media, he's a nightmare because he doesn't need their approval, and he'll roast them on air if they twist the truth. So if both sides hate him, maybe that means he's the only one still playing it straight. If you're tired of echo chambers, if you still believe in unfiltered truth, even when it's uncomfortable, then hit that like button and subscribe, because the culture war isn't cooling off anytime soon, and we're just getting started.